editorx allows you to build websites without any code at all, and that's pretty awesome. This video will be a small introduction or course to editorx. We're going to learn what it is and how it works. And in here, we'll actually give it a bit of a comparison to other products out there. If you haven't heard of editorx before, that's fine. It's actually brought to you by the team that created Wix. They've gone down the path to make more GUI tools to be able to build websites and really customize them so that you can make better designs. If you've heard of Webflow before, this is a similar product, but it comes with a bit of flavor here. You're really going to be able to jump into here and essentially edit out your components without having to worry about things like CSS or HTML. You'll be able to still have full control over things like padding and margin and borders, but it'll just be a lot easier because the GUI interface will help you do all of that. If you don't know who I am, I'm Adrian from Australia. I do videos around design and development, so if you haven't already, hit like and subscribe and we're just going to jump straight into it. Before we get started, I wanted to give you guys a quick heads up. My friend Kyle, he's put together a freelancing bundle with lots and lots of resources that you can check out at Study Web Development, which I'll link in the description below. This bundle basically gets you started to do freelancing yourself. Things like being able to find your very first client, doing proposals, trying to figure out how bidding works, and then doing the work itself. This bundle has everything there, and it's been purchased by more than 3,000 people with some great testimonials. So check it out in the description below, otherwise let's just jump straight into it. Alright, let's get started. We're on the editorx.com website. And here we've got a quick brief about what it is and how it works. But we're simply going to hit start now here to get a website up and running immediately. There's a few different ways to log in. We could put in a username and password or log in with Facebook, but I've got a Google account, so I'm just going to do that instead. I'm just going to use my normal YouTube version here to log in, and that should sign me in immediately. If you've got your own account, you can do it however you want, but this is how I like to do it. Now, I've played around with it a little bit, but we're going to create a brand new site to start from scratch to get a better idea of how editorx works. And you'll notice here that it is still in beta, but for the most part, a lot of the main stuff is already done. So what we're going to do here is probably create maybe something like a blog or maybe a portfolio. There's got lots of different options here, but I like this idea of maybe a portfolio and CV. This is pretty standard, and we've got a good idea of what we're creating with this. We do get a few good examples here for things that we could maybe have pre-designed for us. But since none of these don't specifically look like portfolios, I'm going to start off with a blank canvas, and this will give us a better idea of how editorx works as well. When we do this, it's going to load up the create system here, which is create.editorx.com, and we can get started immediately. Now, what we'll notice is that we have our website here, and we can actually resize it to any size or viewport we want. We automatically have a desktop, a tablet, and a mobile version, which we can utilize, as well as a number of pages here, which we can manage, but for the time being, we just have the home page. Then we've got our very first section in here, and this section or component essentially, which is the header, doesn't really have anything. We've got a number of tools here on the left, and when we select some of these, we'll get different options. So I'm going to go through each one of these to give you a better understanding of how it works, and then we're going to jump in and create our very first website. The first thing to take note of is that we have this thing on the right here, sort of like a little toolbox with things like height and width and sizing. And this is called the inspector. This is where we can edit the current focused item that we're accessing. And this has a number of really cool things like docking and positioning, which we'll get into a little bit later. This we can hide off as well. On the left here, we've got a number of tools, things like adding elements here, which we can quickly add maybe a title or an image or a container, as well as pre-made components and sections as well. We have one here for layers, which is the current item we're viewing, as well as things called masters, which are elements you can utilize on multiple pages. We've got our pages in here, which we currently only have the home page, as well as a theme/styling context here, where we can apply different types of styles to headers and content, paragraphs and coloring. Right now, we're just going to use the default, but we'll play around with this a little bit later to see how it takes effect on all pages. For example, if you wanted to change the typography. Finally, we have the app market, where we can plug in different little components here, like maybe a store or a booking system, and a CMS-like database, where we can pull in maybe lots of rows from Excel or dynamic content and populate that on the website. We might jump in and have a look at that later, but for the time being, I want to start off with something simple, such as updating the title over here with the content we have. This currently is an SVG, and I don't really have any SVGs to click through to change this to. We do get some media here from Wix which we could utilize, but personally I've got a quick logo I've made up as a PNG. So what I might do in this case is we might get rid of this one over here, and I might click the plus sign here on the left, select media, go to uploads, and pull in this one that I've created. This is Masterclass editorx, maybe something I might make in the future. I'm going to drag this here into the header, and I'm also going to resize it. We do have an option here to change the image, as well as another toolbox here, which lets us do different actions depending on what we do with the image. We have some other adjustments we could do, such as maybe even a little photo studio editor, which is really cool. But in this case, I just want to keep it simple. So what I want to be able to do to start off with is actually shrink it down a little bit. I might make it about 50 pixels in height, and we're going to move it here over to the left. We're going to open up the inspector, and this is where we get to figure out how this exactly works. The inspector has some docking options over here. If we select and click the docking from the tab there, it's going to center it from the top and the bottom. If we move it here to the right, it's going to dock it here from the right hand side. So if we move it up and down, we can see that it's docked here from the right, but I want to be able to dock it here from the left. When we dock it here from the left, we're 5% from the left. We'll actually be able to see that here in the docking options as a 5.3%. But instead of doing a percentage, I'm thinking I'm going to do a pixel percentage here. So this pixel amount might be something like maybe 60 pixels from the left. Now, as we increase it and decrease it, we can see that it's taken effect, and it's always about, 60 pixels here from the left, which is really cool. The other thing we can do is as we shrink it down, we can see that it is getting smaller. I personally would like it to stay the same size. So this is where we have some options here on the left. We've got a width, and in this case, I want to make this width in pixels. I want to change the width to maybe be about 300 pixels, maybe about 350 pixels. Now we should see that it stays more or less the same, which is cool, until we get to this mobile viewport where we might need to change it up a little bit. And this is the really cool thing about editorx. We have some responsive design elements we can implement here. So for example, as we shrink down here to about the tablet view, we could make this a little bit smaller, say maybe 300 pixels. Now, as we expand back out to desktop, it goes back to 350, but as soon as we get to tablet, it does shrink down a little bit. Then finally for mobile, we might want to make it a little bit smaller again. So in this case, I might make it 200 pixels. We can see that it's much smaller now, and that's only taken effect for the mobile version. As we expand out to tablet and then to desktop, it's grown back up. So this is one of the really cool things about how you can do responsive design on editorx, and we'll have a look a little bit more about this when we create some of the sections for the page. Now that we have our logo over here, let's see if we can add and manage this menu here on the right. To do that, we're simply going to click on it here, and we can click manage. I want to add in a new link here, and right now we only have the one home page. So if we wanted to add a new link, we've got a few different options over here. We can select a web address, such as let's put one in here for www.enhanceui.com. And this is a quick link that I've just created called Enhance UI, a book that I'm creating for design for developers. So this can be a URL people can click on. We can create another one. This one here can be maybe something like an anchor point to this page. Now we don't have any additional sections just yet, so for the time being I'm going to keep it simple and just call this maybe services or features, which we could create in a sec. and maybe one more over here. So let's add one in. We'll do another anchor point. And this one here could, for example, be pricing. So this gets us up and running with a simple menu, which we can look at a little bit later. I'm thinking one more. We'll do also a YouTube address here. So let's do youtube.com and my name over here. Beautiful. Let's label this as YouTube. Now we've got a few menu items, and one of the cool things about the menu items is that as we shrink, they do as well. And we end up with a little menu which we can open up here from the right or collapse back down. This is really cool. We don't have to worry about creating any extra stuff. It just works immediately. So I'm going to leave that for the time being, and now we can take a look at creating our very first section in here, because we already have one, and all we have to do now is add an element. Now for adding elements, we can add in images, we can add in maybe sections, we can even add in things like containers and layouts and repeaters. Now that we've got this section in here, I'm going to select to apply a grid, and I'm going to do a 3x1 grid. So we've got 3 options in here. What I want to do is place 3 different images in these boxes. So let's actually go to quick add. Let's find the image and just drag one in here. Now, one of the things you might notice with the images is that they're automatically docked when we place them into the design. What docking means in this context is that they're docked to this one grid. So if we were to copy this one across and move one here to the right and one here to the left, we can see that this one here on the left is docked from the top, and we can dock it here from the left too. So when we resize, we can see that they keep their aspect ratio, but they're also keeping their docking measurements too. For this docking, I'm going to get rid of this. I want this to expand out to the whole section. So I'm going to select this stretch button, and now the image has lost its width and height, and instead it's just utilizing that whole section as part of the grid. I'm going to do that over here as well, and we're going to grab one last image, and I'm going to expand this out on the far right. For this middle image, what I'm going to do as well is maybe select from Unsplash a different image to utilize. So I like this one here. Let's select that and upload it. And then for our very last one, we might select these waves. So let's actually pull these in. And that I think is just loading in there. And there we go. Now with these 3 images, we do have another tool which is really cool through editorx here. If we were to go here to focal point, this basically is a point on the actual image we can put focus on. So no matter what responsive viewport we're in, it will always try to focus in on that element. So if we were to select the top right here, for example, and then reduce the size of the image, we can see that the focus still remains here on the top right of the image. But for example, if we were to change the focal point to right here in the center as part of the peak of this mountain and we resize, the focus stays here in the center. This is really cool. It's sort of like adjusting the background position of it. And another useful thing that editorx does. We can do this for all our images, but I'm going to leave it for the time being. The other thing I'd like to be able to do is that for the tablet version, where we don't have enough spaces here for our images, I want to change how this section works. I'm going to adjust the grid here, and I'd like to do it 1x3. This allows us to have more content visible for each one of our images. I'm also going to change the minimum height here to maybe 1200 or maybe 1024 pixels so that we have a bit more size here. Now this is for our section. So this means that each one of our images in our section might need a little bit more space. To increase the size for each one of these images, we'll want to click here on our layers and we'll go to the section over here. Here we can adjust the grid. I want to be able to click edit grid here where we can manually edit the sizing. Right now, if we take a look at the sizing, it's got a min height here of about 200 pixels. I'm going to increase this to 480 and hit enter. And we're going to do that for each one of our items over here. This way they'll have a bit more room and we can add some text in there later on. Let's hit enter on that and click done. And we can see now that as we expand out, here they are, and they expand in nicely here as well. Let's expand this back to desktop. And now that we have these three images in here, I'm going to grab some text to place in here. Now the text here will be something like maybe learn editorx basics. And for this bit of text, I'm going to maybe bold it and select a different text color. We'll select white to start off with. And I might also expand this out to be a little bit bigger. So we'll change the font size here to maybe 60 pixels. We'll also center this so that it looks nice. We can't really see it very well on this kind of background. So the other thing I might be able to do is have a look at adding some effects here. So I've got an option here to highlight, for example. We could give it a black highlight. So if we do that, we can see that it's standing out a lot better there. The other thing we could do, for example, instead of a highlight is maybe, let's see, we could give it another element here that we could drop it behind. So this could be a simple container or something like that. So I'm going to grab a container here and I'm going to click the design and I'm going to fill this with a, say, black background with an opacity of about 50%. I'm going to drag it down here and pull in our inspector and dock it from the bottom and the left. I want to actually make sure that it's utilizing the full width, so I'm just going to expand it out here. And when I do, we can see that the width has swapped to auto here. The only other thing I'm going to do is just shrink it down a little bit here and make sure that our editorx is on top of that component by simply dragging it on top. Now that we've done this, I can get rid of this background that I was applying to it previously. So I'll just do that as clear. And this way it can stand out a little bit better. Now we'll see that this layer actually was overlaid by 1 or 2 pixels here on the right. So now it's docked on our middle item here. We want it to only dock on our main item here. I'm just going to expand this out to be just about the right width. And that seems to have filled out nicely. Now that we have this, we can actually resize our page here. And as we do, we can see that everything fits in on this container. And then later we can have a look at updating it on the tablet view. So for this view over here, let's see what else we can do to make this work. I'm going to dock this text here from the bottom, the left and the right. And I'm also going to expand it out so that it's got a little bit more room to work with. Right now it didn't have much room in terms of the width, so I've made the width 100%. And the other thing I want to do is maybe give it a little bit more height, so let's do that too. I'm gonna just increase it over here, so let's expand it out, and we'll also do a breakpoint here, or a break on the word basics. So maybe we'll do learn basic editorx as the text here. Let's decrease the size of this box because right now it is a little bit too big. I'm going to reduce the size over here. And finally, let's remove all the docking from it for the time being so that I can adjust the size. And let's remove this bit of text here. Now that we've done that, we can actually, we can move this back into this container. And I'm going to expand it out fully. And then I'm going to dock it here from the bottom, left, and right. So now if we resize it, we'll see that it stays within there. The only other thing we can do now is actually adjust the width and height of it, because as we get to a smaller viewport, it might not fit into the box very well. So let's actually remove the bolding and let's maybe make it a little bit smaller, maybe 48 pixels. That should be a bit better, and we'll make this box a little bit smaller too. Great. Now, this box min height, let's do 200. There we go. So I might actually even dock this perfectly in the center here. And let's see how we can do that. So I've undocked all of it. And I think that should keep it here in the center. But it's also caused it to hold on to the width and the height. So maybe I'll just actually keep it docked here from the bottom. Great. So that looks good. And now when we get to this viewport here, it seems to lost its sizing. So for the width, I'm going to select to do a percentage of 100%. For its positioning, I want it to be here at the bottom. So I'm just going to drag it here to the bottom. And I'm also going to dock it here from the bottom left and right. So now as we expand out, we can see that it's expanding and shrinking down perfectly over here. One more thing I'd like to be able to do here for maybe the mobile version is reduce the size of the text here. So I'm going to click edit text and maybe drop that down to 30 pixels. And also change the height of this box maybe down to 180 or 160 pixels. Now we can see that it's fitting in much more nicely on all viewports. So this is a quick example of how we can use the container over here. The other thing we can do is edit this container in different viewports, and the styling will essentially apply downwards, but it won't apply upwards. As you saw in the example where we changed the text here, it only applied for the mobile version, not the tablet or the desktop. But if we were to change the background here for this container, say instead of having a background color, we select to do a different color. This will apply all the way down. So let's actually select over here to have a different background color for this box. We're gonna click here in the design where we have the fill, and I'm gonna select this maybe to have this nice sort of a purple color. Now we'll be able to see that that's updated on all the designs, not just the desktop. But for example here, if we wanted to change this color and say in this case I wanted to go darker, maybe even green or something like that, then this will apply from the tablet onwards. So we can see the mobile has green, the tablet has green, and the desktop has purple, which is cool. This is sort of how the styling can take effect in different viewports, and we can actually have a look at that styling, or we can remove it depending on what we want to do. But in this case, I want to get rid of it, so I'm going to clear it out. To do that, we're just going to simply select it, select these more actions, and click here where we have remove overrides, and that'll get rid of the overriding CSS that we were applying to it. Now it's back to purple. So that's really cool. The next thing we can do now is actually copy this across and paste a new one here on our next element. I'm going to put this here at the bottom of our component, and let's actually grab the container here and just dock it here below. Now that looks like it should be working well. I'm just going to quickly resize it, and that seems to have applied nicely. But I think it might have, yeah, it's a little bit over the top right here. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. And I think that's just fine now. Let's just expand this out, and it snaps right into place as we get to the end of our element. And now if we collapse it down, we can see that it's taken effect. Now for this viewport over here, I'm going to move it in below to our second container over here. So let's move this whole box down here. Let's have a look at the docking. So the docking is already from the bottom. And the only other thing I'm going to do is just expand it all the way out right and left. And we'll see that that now works. So if we were to shrink it down, we can see that it applies, and there it is. So that's cool. Let's change this to learn features of editorx. Great. We might change the background for this one over here to be a green. And we could even get a darker green just so that it matches the background image. And finally, we'll do one more copy of this element and paste it here to our right. So let's move this here to our right. Let's also make sure that we expand this one here on the left just to the very end, and this one on the right to the very end. Great. So that looks like it's fine. Let's do advanced editorx tools. Great, so we've got our 3 items here. I'm also going to change the design on this one here to maybe be this dark shade of gray. And finally, we'll have a look at the tablet version. This is where we'll move this one down here below to the bottom of our image. We'll make sure the docking is on the bottom as well and expand it here to the right and the left. Great, I think that's a little bit too far. It seems to be over the top of our element. So let's actually expand this out one more time. It should just snap into place. And finally, the desktop version already seems to be working just fine. So this is just the header we've done up here. If we wanted to build out more sections, we have a number of different tools where we could even simply drag and drop them into our design to continue building out our page. And with these sections here, we don't even have to fill them out. We can just use the content that we have already available and just change out the image and the text as we need. There's lots of other tools here, but for example, if we just left it like this, we can click publish now. And when we do this, we should get a nice URL where we'll be able to view the website. So I'm going to select view website over here just to see what we get. And here we've got a nice example of the website working for us with our menu and everything that we've put together so far. I know this was just a quick introduction, but I hope you guys enjoyed this because it gives you a quick idea of how you can build out a website without having to worry about any of the code at all. Development is still available, and if you buy the premium version of editorx, you do get a dev mode where you'll be able to access all the custom code, pull in APIs, create your own functions, and lots more. And this might be something we take a look at in future videos as well. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.